Let's make dinner from scratch. Today we are going to make this Swedish meatball pasta. This is something that everyone in my family likes. All the kids like it, my husband likes it. It just goes over really well every time that I make it. This recipe was featured in my most recent vlog, which I just talked about like the all or nothing mindset as far as cooking from scratch and homesteading and homemaking. I don't always cook 100% from scratch, but when I have time, I love to because there's just nothing like it. I mean, the flavor, the quality of your food is just so much better, and you do get kind of spoiled once you start cooking from scratch. You're like, ooh, I don't want to go back to the store-bought stuff. So we're going to start by making the meatballs. You saw me cut up some bread. You can either use bread crumbs or just whole slices of bread to start for the base of these meatballs. So I had some kind of dry bread. So I cut up 4 slices of bread, just cubed it up, and then poured in a half cup of milk, added 2 eggs, added my meat. I have 2 pounds of ground beef and 1 pound of ground sausage here. And now I'm adding in my seasonings. Usually I would mince an onion and 4 or 5 cloves of garlic, but I didn't feel like going down in the basement and getting that because I have a new baby and I just don't feel like doing a lot of things. Making the meal from scratch was enough work for me today, so I just did dry seasonings. I did 2 teaspoons of salt, a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, half teaspoon of nutmeg, half teaspoon of allspice, a teaspoon of garlic powder, and a teaspoon of onion powder. Then mix that all up really good in a big mixing bowl and roll into meatballs. I think I had about 18 meatballs. So when I'm cooking, I go heavy on the meat when I'm making a main course. Nothing drives me crazy more than like a pasta dish or something where there's hardly any meat. We are big meat eaters in this family. So if you're not, then you could always cut this meatball recipe in half if you don't want to use 3 whole pounds of meat. Then yeah, that'd be fine. You could just cut it in half. But my family, like I said, we're big meat eaters, especially when we're going to carb load on fresh pasta. I feel like you really need the protein to offset that. So now that I've got the meatballs made, let's make the pasta. I am letting my meatballs chill in the fridge while I make the pasta dough, just kind of getting in my workflow here because I will need to let this pasta dough rest for a little bit, and that's when I'll start cooking my meatballs. So this is a really easy egg noodle pasta, just a few simple ingredients. 2 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of olive oil or avocado oil, and 4 eggs. Mix that all up. It makes a really, really pretty, elastic pasta dough that's very easy to work with, very easy to handle. So I'm just going to knead this dough until it's really smooth. You don't want lumpy pasta. You do not want chunks of flour in your pasta. That's no good. So once I have kneaded this really well, like I said, I usually like to let it rest. I wrap it in plastic wrap, like you can see a plastic bag like sitting off to the side there on the screen, and I let it rest for a half an hour. It's just becomes more workable after that rest period. And then I start rolling out my pasta. You can do this by hand. If you are a pasta granny, does anyone follow pasta grannies on Instagram or here on YouTube? They're amazing, like old Italian grandmas who do it all by hand. They make all the different kinds of pastas by hand and they make it look so easy. So if you are an expert pasta granny, you be my guest and you roll this out by hand, and I'm cheering you on. But I am not a pasta granny. It's so hard to do it by hand, so I cheat. I have this manual pasta machine. I absolutely love it. I know that there are electric ones, but I just really like this one. It works really well, very sturdy. I've had it for a few years now and I use it all the time. It has a pasta cutting attachment, and so I'm just rolling out my dough into really thin sheets of pasta first. Then I will run it through the cutting attachment. I actually have an entire video I will link if you look up in the right hand corner of this video. It's like pasta making tutorial or something like that if you just want me to walk you through using a pasta machine, but I mean it's pretty self-explanatory. So however you want to make your pasta, this dough is pretty forgiving, whether you want to roll it by hand or use a pasta machine. I know that you can also use like a KitchenAid attachment too. So I've got my pasta made and I've got a big pot of water boiling because I'm gonna have to boil my pasta. Now I'm gonna go ahead and cook my meatballs and start the sauce. So I'm just browning my meatballs on all sides, not cooking them through. And I've got a big Dutch oven here, because they'll get cooked through in the sauce when we start the sauce. So I'm just browning my meatballs, turning them so, like I said, they get brown on all sides, and then I'm gonna remove them and I set them back on a plate there to the right on the counter. You can kind of see it in the background. And I'm dropping my pasta in a pot of boiling water. Freshly made pasta does not take long to cook at all, maybe 5 minutes. So keep an eye on it because you don't want it to become mush. So see, I just dropped this pasta in and it's already looking really, really good. There's nothing like fresh homemade pasta. Bonus points if you have access to fresh eggs, like really truly free-range eggs with the orange yolks, you'll have the prettiest yellow pasta. So I'm going to start on the sauce here, starting with 4 tablespoons of butter, going to make my roux. And once that 4 tablespoons of butter melts, I'm using the same Dutch oven, by the way, so I did not drain the drippings from cooking the meatballs. I left it all in there, added my 4 tablespoons of butter, and then I added a 1/4 cup of flour, whisked that together, let it bubble up a little bit. Now I'm adding my bone broth. So you can use, I'm using beef bone broth. I had some freshly made anyway. You can use chicken too. I don't think anyone will tell the difference, but it's 8 cups of bone broth. Just kind of slowly pour that in while you're whisking, let it thicken up. Add a 1/2 cup of cream, and that is the base to your sauce. I'm adding my meatballs back to the sauce now. I also added a teaspoon of salt and a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper to that sauce. Added my meatballs back in, and now I'm letting that sauce kind of bubble up, and the meatballs will cook through now. My pasta, I boiled it for about 5 minutes, and now I'm adding it back to I'm adding it to the pot with the sauce and the meatballs, and everything will finish cooking in this one big Dutch oven here. So I just stirred everything together, put the lid on, let it simmer for about 15-20 minutes so those meatballs can cook through, and then I turned the heat off, but I left the lid on for another 10 to 15 minutes just to let the sauce thicken up. Now I'm going to pour it into a dish so I can make it look kind of pretty and take pictures for the blog. You don't have to do that though. Don't, as my husband always says to me, don't make extra dishes for yourself. And then I tell him, but yes, I need the pictures, so the extra dishes are worth it. So anyway, I'm just gonna garnish this with a little bit of fresh parsley and call it a day. We're good to go, we're ready to eat. Like I said, this is just something, it's not too out there. It's very rich, very hearty, but it's not like super unusual flavors that kids won't like. Everybody in your family will love this. The detailed recipe with step-by-step instructions and precise measurements will be on my blog. It is linked in the description of this video, so just tap the more button below the video and you'll see the link.